I know I may have been rather bitter in my criticisms of episode 1, but after watching episode 2, I'm now slightly more optimistic for the rest of the series. This episode contains more of what I call content, in that we aren't thrown filler our way at every other scene just to establish that our characters have moved a few feet in the opposite direction. Anyway, without further ado, here is my review of the second episode of series 6. Here's your spoiler alert thing, which will run until Granny finishes reciting her favourite 50s radio quote.
Are you sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin.
After a year without Bran, the show left me yearning for some Hodor and mystical action, especially with how the finale of Series 4 was delivered. There's not really a lot to say about this little segment at the beginning here, only if anybody knows why they changed the actor for the Three-Eyed Raven to the guy from The Exorcist in the new Star Wars movie, please let me know in the comments. It seems like one of those casting decisions that has no purpose aside from putting the actor's name in to boost ratings. Oh my god, that old guy who's barely in the 7th Star Wars movie's now in Game of Thrones? That's so cool! This scene is pretty cool in terms of how oddly surreal it is to be seeing a flashback in a story that's renowned for being so focused on the current events of the plot. I do hope the rest of Bran's story isn't just solely focused on showing who Jon Snow's parents are though, but I have been wrong before, so I won't be too pessimistic about this right now. The scene at the Watch is masterfully paced and edited, from the shining like cuts as the door starts getting smashed down, right until the gate gets smashed in by the giant. I certainly didn't expect the mutiny I predicted to come this soon though. It seems Jon Snow had more friends than I initially thought. Something I didn't think of in my last review was that I don't quite get why Jon wasn't burned sooner. With the threat of the White Walkers coming ever closer, you'd think they wouldn't want Jon reawakening and cutting everyone to pieces. It was probably for the reason that what happens at the end of this episode needs to happen, so they 100% cannot burn his body. Ah, plot convenience, we meet again. Yeah, that's right, fuckboy, you got what you deserved. Do you know what? I had my hopes a little too high up in this next scene that we'd be introduced to a new and interesting character for some bizarre reason. This pisshead gets his ass handed to him for speaking out of turn, and my response to both this guy and the crossbowman at the wall was just laughter. I'm not entirely sure if this is the right response, but two ridiculously oversized characters killing two simple humans just looks quite funny. The part where Cersei attempted to get past the guards though, very intense. I loved how this scene just climaxed its way through music and the terrified troops that stood in Cersei's way. The potential for a massacre was really high at this point, and I'm happy this segment in the capital wasn't a complete waste of time like last week's. The funeral section's dialogue was really good, and I feel like something very big is building up for those in King's Landing. A lot of hostility and resentment, confusion and anger. I'm really looking forward to what's going to happen there. The High Sparrow builds himself up like he's just finished reading the Communist Manifesto, and Tyrion pays the dragons a visit to convince them to eat. I'm still quite on the fence about still being in Meereen, to be fair, because on the one hand we have great moments like this occur, and yet on the other hand not a lot of progress is actually being made here, making me wonder why the show is still focusing on it. The dialogue Peter Dinklage is given is well written and he performs it very well. As always, he is very humorous, and Varys is always a welcome character for me also, but I still feel like these segments grow rather tiresome and uninteresting once we establish that there's anything truly interesting happening here anymore. Arya's storyline takes another tiny step towards progress before we are interrupted by the Boltons. When will she be learning how to warg into cats? That's what I want to know. Anyway, as we all saw, it was quite the plot twist when we saw Bolton Sr. being killed by Bolton Jr. The unfortunate element of this scene is it's deceptively shot. When a character is stabbed, normally we see the victim's reaction instantly, but instead we see Ramsay wincing as he plunges his dagger into his father. It's not a problem really, as ultimately we know who dies. It was just a tad confusing at first, as I thought Roose had killed Ramsay. Now that would have been interesting. I did find it rather fitting, however, that Ramsay killed Roose in the same way that Roose stabbed Robb Stark. Karma bites back eventually, apparently. Lady Bolton and her newborn child are then eaten by the dogs, and we can discuss the gory details of how horrid it was another time. What I'm interested in is whether old man Walder Frey will have anything to say about two of his family members being eaten alive. I've been praying for another reappearance from him for ages, but we haven't really heard much from them since Series 3. After establishing Noticing Reek isn't going to stay at the wall with the others, we have quite a refreshing scene at the Iron Islands. Balon Greyjoy, who we haven't seen since Series 3 either, makes a rather dramatic exit after having a chat with Yara. It goes to show how long it's been since I paid any attention to the Greyjoys, considering I didn't even realise her name was changed from the books. She is titled Asha in the books, or Asha however you pronounce that, and for some bizarre reason in the show they changed her name to Yara. So anyway, Balon greets his brother on the rickety bridge, and I found this scene to be very interesting considering in the books it's left rather ambiguous as to how Balon fell to his death. Not only that, but this is possibly the first time we've had a scene with two characters that aren't really that well fleshed out. It's got the whole, I wonder what we're going to learn about the Greyjoys this series vibe to it, although I will guess that not a lot will, considering how little Daenerys or Tyrion or Arya or Sansa are involved in that part of Westeros. Looking back at the clip, I had to make this edit. I do apologise for any of you who are afraid of or allergic to cringe.
You shall not pass!
So now we come to the part everyone on the internet's been talking about, Jon Snow's revival. I found it very interesting how slowly it took her to revive Jon compared to Beric Dondarrion's revival in Series 3, but then again Jon has been dead for a good while in comparison, and there's probably a lot more emotion behind this revival too. Prophecy and fate of the world kind of shit. Now I've heard multiple praises and multiple complaints about this outcome, but I sure as shit was happy the man is alive. The main criticisms of this I've heard are regarding fan service and pandering, in that the only reason he's been revived is to please all the fans of the show. Now I'm not entirely certain this is a legitimate criticism considering how three very favourable characters were just killed and not even given a second chance at the Red Wedding. Not to mention Ned Stark or Stannis kicking the bucket, but I think that those that have been watching for long enough are used to this shit by now. I mean, yeah, it was a blow seeing him being stabbed at the end of Series 5, but the possibility of revival was there. Unlike so many other scenes. There was more hope towards it simply because it was more likely to happen. Now, what piques my interest the most about Jon coming back is that I predict a change in his character. Something's going to probably change in him for the worse as he's cheated death. I can't remember if it was a quote from the show or the books, and I'm probably paraphrasing here, but I remember reading or hearing something about reviving the death via a red priest or priestess means that the dead will have changed or have been altered in some way after the ritual. If somebody could explain or quote this better in the comments, it would be greatly appreciated, but I'm looking forward to seeing what Jon does in the next episode. I hope he grabs his sword and kills that little Ollie kid anyway. This episode was certainly a vast improvement over the first of this series, but I hope you all enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you want to see more in the future. Bye bye for now, here are the outtakes. After a especially with how the final of relatability is so much better than continuity. Arya's storyline takes another step to it goes to show how long it's been since I paid any attention to the Greyjoys. Oh dear, ran out of breath there. Now I've heard multiple praises and multiple complaints. This scene is pretty cool in terms of how oddly surreal it is compared to seeing nothing or what the fuck.